In our next bucket, we're going to look at teachers being able to model for their students so that students can see the teacher's thinking without sacrificing the ability to see all students. The first one we already looked at, the dot cam option of being able to use the camera input, toggling between the camera inputs so that you can stay in gallery view, you can spotlight the teacher video, and students will see the dot cam while the teacher can still see the full gallery view. The second one is common, and teachers are likely using it all the time, using a shared screen in Zoom and annotating on that shared screen. The third one is where we'll start with whiteboard.fi. Whiteboard.fi is a free online whiteboard program. You have a URL here. Students get this URL and plug it in, or click on a link, and they will then have a whiteboard. Their whiteboard will be here at the bottom. You'll be able to see a gallery of all of the whiteboards, and you'll be able to see student work in real time as they update those whiteboards. At the top is My Teacher Whiteboard. They can also watch that whiteboard in real time. So if I were to draw something on the whiteboard, and then we click over to a student version, they can toggle the teacher whiteboard and they can watch that happen in real time. So that is how the ability to model for students works on Whiteboard FI. At the same time, I can see whatever they're doing on their whiteboard. So if the student is working on their own whiteboard, I'm going to see that come up in my dashboard. I can also put a background image in to my Whiteboard FI. And now this can become the image that we work on. And finally, I can push that image to students. And now if I'm in the student view, that's going to pop up on my screen, and I'm going to work on that image. So I can push things to students in real time, and then I can see them as they work on their student whiteboards with a full dashboard. So Whiteboard FI is a great option for modeling and for seeing student work. The next thing we're going to look at is using the draw it function in Nearpod with a shared screen. So in this case, we'd be in a Nearpod, and we have the draw it, but this is student facing. This is what students are going to be working on. So here is the student version of that, and they're drawing. But if I want to use it to model, what I can do is share my screen in Zoom and just flip over to the student view. When I flip over to the student view and I'm sharing my screen in Zoom, I just ask students to watch the Zoom window, and then I can annotate on the draw it exactly the same way that I might annotate on a Zoom screen. But it's going to be in the same problem that kids are about to see, or the same task that kids are about to see. So that's my next option for annotating. Next, we're going to look at adding an activity. So I can do, if I don't have that model up and ready, I'll flip back to teacher view here in my Nearpod. I can again share my screen. I can again flip over to student view, but first I can add in a draw it. And now I essentially have created a blank whiteboard for myself on a shared screen that I can model. So I would flip to student view, and I would be able to model on that whiteboard with a draw it, and students would be able to watch that on the shared screen. This time I'm just adding it in as an added activity. The next thing that we can look at is embedding in a Nearpod. So we can keep these things in our Nearpod. The first one we're going to look at is a Google Draw. So if I continue moving my Nearpod forward here, I'll close this activity. And I'll move to the next slide. This is a Google Draw embedded in a Nearpod. So what the student is seeing is over here. They're seeing exactly what I'm seeing. They're working through their student Nearpod, but I can now model here. So I can use a drawing tool, I can use some sort of manipulative. So in this case, I have a drag and drop option that I created, and they're going to be seeing the same thing as they watch on their view. I've been taken a Nearpod and embedded a Google Draw into that Nearpod so that I can use it for modeling. One key thing to note here is when you create that Google Draw, here's a Google Draw, my sharing permissions are important. If I don't want students to be able to work on that Nearpod, on that Google Draw themselves, I need to make this anyone on the internet with the link can view, not anyone on the internet with the link can edit. If I want them to be able to actually manipulate those manipulatives on the screen, for example, if I want to call on someone and ask them to drag and drop, then I should make this edit. The next one we're going to look at is the ability to add a Google Doc or a Kami. In this case, I have a Kami, which is a Google Doc that is ready to be annotated. This one is a little bit tricky, and so are the next few that we'll see. On the student side, they're going to see a pop-up like this, and then they're going to see the actual document that we're annotating, which is great. On the teacher side, we're going to see something like this. We're going to have this open in its separate tab. And when I go to that tab, I can now annotate in this Kami, and students in their Nearpod, without leaving their Nearpod, will be able to see what I'm annotating in the Kami. So if we want to model annotating text, we can embed the Kami into the Nearpod. And if I make that Nearpod bigger, if I make this Kami screen bigger, they'll be able to watch us annotate in the Nearpod. The next one we'll look at as soon as I click to the next slide in Nearpod. In this case, we'll move on to looking at Jamboard. You'll notice that on the student side, the Kami just goes away when I move this teacher paste Nearpod forward. And this one also pops out. This is a Jamboard. This is a Google-based whiteboard tool that's really easy to use. We're going to do the same thing. We're going to use a different tab as a teacher. And as I draw in this other tab, it's got a great drawing tool here. As I draw in this other tab, students in their Nearpod will be able to see me updating the Jamboard in real time. It will pop out, but when I move the Nearpod forward, that pop out will go away and we'll move to the next slide. Here is a Whiteboard FI embedded in a Nearpod. Same thing, it will pop out for students. For me as a teacher, I'm just going to go to my other tab with the Whiteboard FI in it, and now I can model for them here in this other tab. And they will see that. They will see that on their pop-out screen. They'll have to toggle the teacher whiteboard. They can work on their whiteboard, and I will be able to see that in my Whiteboard FI just like before. So each of these, the Google Draw, the Google Doc or Kami, the Jamboard, and the Whiteboard FI can be embedded into the Nearpod. The Google Draw will live right there in the Nearpod slide. These three will pop out, as you can see with this pop out from the Nearpod, but they will still update in real time and I can still use them to model.